Patrick and Kevin, how are you this morning?
Doing great.
Excellent.
How are you, Ted?
Great.
Doing awesome. This is a treat. I don't get two guests on the pod that often, so it's exciting we can have 50% more banter, which is always fun. So
Absolutely.
I think you know the audience. You guys are both pretty visible in the KM&I world, but for those that don't know you, I've known you both for a really long time. I think maybe early 2010s. Patrick, you were CKO at OD, Ogletree Deacons, and Kevin, you were running ARC KM back when we were sponsors. So
That's right.
A lot of history with you both, and I'm really excited about the conversation. We're going to talk about just events. We're going to talk about innovation. We're going to talk about the events you guys have coming up in, God, really, what is that? 6 weeks?
2 months?
Yeah.
8 weeks?
8 weeks.
With this counting.
Yeah.
Yeah. 7 weeks and 6 days.
We can hear the tick of every moment here, but yes.
Yeah.
8 weeks as of yesterday.
And you guys have a new event coming up that we're going to talk about. But before we do, let's get you guys introduced. Patrick, why don't you go first?
Yeah, thanks. Patrick DiDomenico here. Hello, everybody. Let's see, where to begin? I used to practice law for about 9 years, switched out of practicing in the early to mid 2000s. I think it was 2005, actually, into knowledge management, innovation, technology, at the firm that I practiced at, which was called Gibbons Celdeo, and then continued to do that type of work for the last 20 years. In fact, this is my 20th year, 2025 here, doing KM, innovation, technology, et cetera. Along the way, I did, the CKO and Chief Innovation Officer jobs at various firms like Ogletree Deacons, as you mentioned, and as a Debevoise and Plimpton for a couple of years. My most recent firm was Jackson Lewis, where I was the Chief Innovation Officer. And then in, 2022? It's a blur at this point. Last few years, I went out on my own, started consulting. So doing all the fun stuff that I was doing at individual firms, helping other firms do that. Also in-house legal departments and legal tech companies. I've been advising and investing in legal tech companies for a number of years now. And then, of course, started the KM&I Conference in 2023. And Ted, I know you are very familiar with it because you are our very first sponsor, which we appreciate. And this year, partnering with Kevin, who I've known for all 20 of those years, spun up Legal Tech Connect. And I know we're going to be talking about that as well. So excited to be here. Thanks for having us, Ted.
Yeah, absolutely. Kevin?
Yeah, I think that 20-year reference actually fits like a glove. I in 2005 joined the core team at the ARC Group, which was known for its flagship event, the KM Legal Conference, which initially ran in I think September of 2005 in Chicago. So I spent about 17 years with ARC. So we produced a number of practice management events. We had a BI conference, a competitive intelligence conference, a long-running law firm libraries conference and community that we sort of fostered. And Patrick and Joshua Fireman and Ron Friedman, I think, initially it was Joshua and Ron that were co-chairing the KM Legal Conference. And then several years later, we moved it to New York, and it was Patrick and Joshua. So we have been working together almost all of those 20 years, at least 15 of them. So 17 years as program director at ARC Group, just shy of 3 years with Inside Practice. And then, as Patrick mentioned, more recently joined forces. And something we've been talking about for many years to actually kind of formalize our working relationship and collaborate and do this together. And it's been a lot of fun right out of the gate.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of all the events that you both have been involved with. I was an ARC KM sponsor in the early days. And, we were a sponsor in the ARC BI event. I don't know if there were multiple. There was one in New York. It was really good. It was small, but it was really good. I think we presented
Yeah, that
actually.
event ran at least 8 or 9 years.
Did it?
That BI event, which was interestingly kind of a precursor to the AI stuff, right? The predictive analytics, and yeah, it was very finance focused, I think, in general, but that was a great event.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit on the intimate. It was usually 50 to 80 people.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the ARC events were.
Yep. So,
Yeah.
okay. I mean, I think probably most of our listeners are familiar with your KM&I event, but Patrick, why don't you just kind of give an overview for those that aren't? Like, what's the
Yeah,
purpose? Who's the
absolutely.
audience? What kind of speakers do
Sure.
you have? How long is it? All that sort of stuff.
Yeah, the basics. Yeah, so we're going into our third year. So we started in 2023. We had a great first year. We sold out, which I was very happy about because I was very nervous to, spin up my own conference. Um, but yeah, we did great the first and second year. We grew from the first year to about 230 attendees and sold out last year. And this year we're headed for another sellout, I think, which is going to be great, a brand new venue. But the gist of the conference is, in some ways, it's to tribute to what Kevin had done for many, many years at ArcKM. It's a 2-day event similar to ArcKM, bringing together all the leaders in knowledge management and innovation. Of course, we sort of tacked on the innovation aspect of it, right? So it's not just ArcKM. This is knowledge management and innovation for legal. And, I think I know it was intentional, but I think it was a good idea because a lot of the knowledge management folks in the last, 10 or so years have started to, sort of do double time, double work in innovation, right? And I know you've done some research on this topic, Ted. You've analyzed the rise of the innovation professional in law firms, and there's been a great increase in the number of people with innovation in their title. And, I don't know if we predicted it or if we reacted to it, maybe a little bit of both. But because knowledge management and innovation folks tend to gather together and sort of some do both of the types of work that each other does. Sometimes it's the same leader, right? We often see Chief Knowledge and Innovation Officer as the head of innovation and knowledge management at law firms. So we combined those concepts, and it's very much a peer-driven event. Again, 2 days in New York City. It's October 22, 23 this year, and it's all about the community. And speaking of which, one of the things that's very important to us about that community is that there's, as we like to say, there's no second-class citizens. We really recognize that everybody, sponsors, vendors, law firm folks, in-house folks, we're all members of this community, and we treat everybody equally at the event because we realize that collaboration and cooperation among all members of that community is very important to success in all respects. So we can get into some of the details of some of the sessions. You've been to it ever since it started, so you know the vibe and the sort of way we do things, but happy to sort of expound on any of those things. And of course, this year we're co-locating it with our new event, which I know we'll talk about in a little bit as well.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about treating everyone as equals, the reality is there's a significant amount of cross-pollination between those worlds, especially law firm and vendor. I mean, you see people move from the law firm side to the vendor side, then back. You have people who are longtime vendors. Glenn LaForce is a good example. He was global head of sales at Handshake. Now he was in a KM role at Sherman, now CKIO at Holland and Knight. So yeah, these constituencies are fluid, and they move back and forth. Kevin, you want to maybe give us a little overview of Legal Tech Connect and what the goals and objectives are there?
Yeah, yeah. As Patrick mentioned, the KM&I event is very much peer-to-peer, law firm peer-to-peer in terms of the content, and it's a lot largely about what's happening within law firms and within KM and innovation departments. I think an easy way to describe Legal Tech Connect is it's kind of the inverse. It's kind of the external. It's looking at market forces, the regulatory environment, and of course, product innovation. So it's the spotlight is expressly on the product developers, the solution providers, um, their origin stories, what they're solving for. So I think it'll be a fascinating thread of discussion around what's driving innovation. Um, and I think it kind of opens the aperture up a little bit to have a really dynamic and broad view of the market and kind of the market pressures, kind of hitting law firms from all angles, really, from in a competitive sense. So it's really a broad view of emerging trends, the regulatory environment, and then again that innovation theme on the development side. So I think it brings together cohorts that aren't normally typically in the same room at the same time. One of those being the investment community, which a tip of the hat to TLTF for tapping into that energy. And they've got one of the preeminent events in the industry, and we thought, you know what, that makes a lot of sense to open the door to that community as well. So it should be a very lively couple of days. And you mentioned cross pollination. I think that will be kind of the magic, particularly on the networking side, which will all be completely cross pollinated, if you will.
Yeah, I've been I didn't go the first year to TLTF, but they started around the same time you did with KM&I, Patrick. It was
I think that's right.
I think
2022.
that's right. They might have started. Are they in their fourth year? Is this their fourth year?
This is
This
their
coming?
fourth. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. This is our third for Cam and I, so it must have been a year before. Although I think they started during the pandemic. I'm not sure. I only went
The
for the
fun
first time
did.
last year.
Yeah, the
Okay,
fun started
right,
during the
right, right.
pandemic. I think their first conference was in 2022 because it hit my radar late.
Okay,
I didn't make it to the first one, but I've been to the two since then, and I'm going again this
yeah,
year. Yeah, and they do a great
yeah,
job. It is
absolutely.
it's an interesting mix of law firm stakeholders, investors, founders. They have some thought leaders. There were some academics there last year
Yeah.
as well, which again, interesting kind of mix. So, is this a cross access event? I mean, do people from that buy a Cayman ticket automatically get access to the LTC um, content, or vice versa, or those separate SKUs?
Yeah, they're separate. Technically, they're separate conferences.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not technically, actually, and technically, they are separate conferences. And by the way, you know, we're saying Legal Tech Connect, but Legal Tech Connect is the organization that Kevin and I founded, and the event is called Innovators and Investors. We just call it LTC for short because it's our first event. Of course, we'll have more
Yeah.
events under the under the LTC umbrella, but the Innovators and Investors event, yeah, it's a separate conference. We found this beautiful space in New York City. It's called Ease Hospitality, and it's on Third Avenue at 40th Street. And a little bit, it's sort of a opportunistic thing in some ways, because I've been wanting to do additional events and been wanting to partner with Kevin for a long time. And when we found this new venue, it's so big and beautiful. There's such great space there. We're definitely going to do KM&I there. And then we realized there's all this additional space. We might be able to do this co-located event and bring together these communities because there's so much overlap with them. So yes, they're separate conferences, but it's almost thinking about it as separate tracks of the same conference, if you will. But they are two separate tickets. So in the largest room, it'll be the KM&I room. It holds about 220 people. And then the second largest room will be the Legal Tech Connect content. There's another room that's going to be sort of an overflow room. But those two events will have content in those rooms simultaneously. And they are separate tickets. Now you can get crossover tickets if you want. I think we estimate that there'll be about 10 to 15% of the total crowd in both events that want a crossover ticket because, some people like me, right? I was a CKO. I'm also an investor. I do lots of different things. And I think there's a good number of folks that have that diversity of interest. Plus, there's quite frankly just a lot of great content, and Ted, because you're on one of these panels, you're moderating one of these panels. So I think there's going to be great interest in both events. The challenge with that, of course, is physics. You can't be in two places at once. But some people will have those crossover tickets and want to pop in and out of the two sessions. But to Kevin's point, I think one of the best things about this is that all of the other activities, the networking, the breakfast, lunch, coffee breaks, networking parties, all of that stuff over the 2 days, I think it's about 8 hours of networking, is combined, right? So the content is simultaneously going on, and then the networking is simultaneously going on to bring everybody together. So we're talking like 330 people or so, all networking together between and among themselves. So super excited about that aspect of it.
Yeah, as far as the name goes, people are still going to call you LTC, the event LTC, just like they do ILTA. Like people don't,
Right.
a lot of times they don't say ILTACon, I'm going to ILTA, or they don't say TLTF Summit, they say I'm going to TLTF. So
absolutely.
it's
We have
just
no problem with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's worse
Rolls
things
off
that
the
could
tongue.
happen. Yeah.
Exactly.
So capital, startups, AI, regulatory change, like what, you talked a little bit about it, but maybe you can drill into high level themes of the content in terms of how are you bringing all that together? Are there going to be some sessions that are investor focused? Are there some sessions that are going to be, founder focused? Is there a lot of kind of blending in on the agenda? What does that look like?
Yeah, great question. I'll give you the short answer, and then Kevin, maybe if you want to expound on some of it.
Sure. Yeah.
There's at LTC, there's basically three groupings, if you will, of content. The first grouping of content is for the investors and for the buyers. These are what we're calling solutions showcase stages, right? It's kind of like a startup stage where startups and even some more mature companies get an opportunity to do a 5-minute pitch on stage, right? So telling the investors in the room and the buyers in the room what they're all about. Are they seeking funding for a new round? Are they seeking new customers? Do they just want to get their products and services out there in front of more people? So there'll be at least two stages, two solutions showcase stages. So that's one of the groups of content on that stage. The second group of content is kind of advice to legal tech startups, right? There's sort of mentor panels and founders' journeys and these types of things. So we have folks like Haley Altman from Litera, right, who has, her company Doxley was acquired, and then she was involved in lots of acquisitions, and other folks like her, Peter Ozelin and others, who are going to basically be, temporary mentors to these. In fact, one of our panels is called the Mentors Panel, advising legal tech startups, and there's a lot of them out there, as we know, a lot of new ones, what it's all about to do this from soup to nuts, right? From founding to exit, and give lots of great advice about that. And then the third grouping of content at Legal Tech Connect is, I would say, it's just sort of general legal technology sessions. What's new in AI? What's going on? What's the latest? What's important? What needs to be on your radar? These types of things. And it's a nice balance of that type of content, I think. Happy to drill down into any of the areas. Kevin, I don't know if you want to expound on some of the more interesting sessions. Yeah,
I think high level, I think bringing the two events together kind of tells a broader story about what's happening in legal innovation. I don't think it's really incremental, if that's the right word to use. I think there's market level shifts happening that require more alignment across builders, buyers, and funders. And I think, I think that's kind of the high level story. I think there's this gravitational pull. It's much wider, right? Investment capital flowing in. All of these startups that are solving oftentimes very discrete challenges or exploring opportunities, and shifting client expectations. That's certainly part of the story. We mentioned regulatory change. So all of these things are happening, impacting and reshaping this ecosystem. So I think from a high level, I think it does tell a really compelling story. Yeah, again, the access piece and who will be in which room. As Patrick said, there are distinct physical limitations there. And in fact, the Legal Tech Connect room, is a bit smaller than the KM&I room. And so we're going to feel this out and see, exactly, where it's kind of like water finding its level, right? I know there will be a lot of interest, looking in both directions, but we hope to accommodate those desires the best we can. But yeah, we're excited about this. I think it's a very comprehensive look at market snapshot, which relative to the work I've done, it's a really, like I said, casting a very wide lens on the marketplace.
It's going to be, there are going to be some interesting conversations now about, especially on the investor side and on the founder side. I don't know anybody who disagrees with that we are frothy right now in terms of valuations, capital influx into the market, number of startups that are being stood up that maybe don't have a complete vision, and it's driving interesting dynamics that are exciting and a little concerning at the same time. Because we all know how the story ends. All three of us are old enough to have seen a few economic cycles in our day. And I think where we're at today, I don't know if you guys would disagree, where we're at today feels a lot like the .com era. So, in the late 90s, there was all of this money coming in to, .coms that sometimes had no revenue, sometimes had a fairly thrown together business plan, yet they were acquiring funding. And that ended in a big correction. And I think we're headed in that direction as well. But what is a parallel between then and now is the underlying assumptions that e-commerce was going to be a massive force and completely disrupt the retail economy were true. And just like with AI, the transformational power of AI is undeniable. But as irrational exuberance starts to gain traction, people think they can throw money in any direction and have a successful outcome, and that's just not the case. I'm actually relieved. So InfoDash, for those that don't know, is an intranet extranet platform, and I consider us AI adjacent. You guys might not even really know this about us, but we have something called Integration Hub that we've had this product for years. We've never named it. We used to call it the InfoDash API, but it's essentially a middle tier that we deploy in a client's Azure tenant that has tentacles into all of their back office systems, that is security trimmed and respects ethical wall boundaries. And what's interesting about that, we, to be perfectly honest, didn't see this coming, the need for this. But what it does is it enables law firms to tap into their line of business data using all of Microsoft's Lego blocks like Azure AI Search, Azure OpenAI, Copilot, Power Automate, Power Apps. It creates a mechanism for them to tap into their data. And I don't know how you guys see things in the future, but how I see them is data. Firms have historically differentiated themselves through brand that's largely been driven by people and outcomes, and that's still going to be very important. But there's a new component to the equation, which is what data do you have access to and how can you leverage it in your legal workflows to build better work product, to advise clients more effectively. And we kind of, so we're AI adjacent, right? We're not, I'm glad because I feel like when the train comes and like I'm standing to the side, we will get impacted if there's a big correction, but not nearly, all these companies that are, thin wrappers on AI platforms. I don't know. Do you guys see the market as frothy as I do, or do you have a different perspective?
I think that's a tough one. I think there are strong parallels to the .com era and the AI era, if you will. But I think, and this is what popped into my mind, Ted, we've been talking about the unbundling of services for a long time in legal, right? And then you see these, what they're being described as these AI native law firms like Crosby and Covenant, if you're familiar with these, that do very specific things, leveraging automation and AI. And they almost have a look and feel of like a ALSP, right? But they're law firms doing legal work with lawyers. But again, I feel like it's part of that unbundling concept, where you can leverage the tech to do discrete tasks really effectively, really efficiently to a different price point. So I think there are some distinctions between where we are now relative to the .com boom and bust. 'Cause and clearly the dawn of the internet changed the business landscape, from that point forward. AI is probably most certainly going to do the same thing. We're not sure at what speed and velocity, but um, do you see, particularly on the transactional side, AI furthering that unbundling of legal service delivery and kind of putting them in really specific buckets, if you will?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the answer is yes. Due diligence is a great example of
Yeah,
a piece of that value chain that is subject to a very high degree of automation. And, tasks that took, a room full of junior associates pouring through mountains of documents over weeks of time can now be done in days through AI. So I think that we are absolutely going to see an unbundling, and it may be kind of a decomposition and then a recomposition of, the providers that, like, it doesn't, especially on a transaction, it's unlikely that you're going to go to one place for your due diligence and, somewhere else to, draft up your stock purchase agreements. But I think that these big law firms that, especially in the transactional world, where pedigree is such an important aspect of the whole process. Like when you're on the other side of the table and you see, Gunderson or Cooley or Wilson Sonsini or Goodwin or, one of these big reputable firms that have a ton of experience on the other side of the table, it changes your negotiation strategy, right? Versus
yeah,
somebody who's not well represented. So that stuff is still going to matter. It's not like people are not going to go to one of these firms to get the work done. But I think these big firms are going to have to think very carefully about their process and figure out how to incorporate automation, or they're going to lose work to the firms that do. That's what
yeah,
seems to make
Yeah.
sense to me.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things at play. First of all, your point about content and data being very important as opposed to, also important, but as opposed to just resting on the laurels of the reputation and brand and pedigree of the firm and the lawyers who are there. I think that's true. Those things will continue to be important. Good lawyers are, you need good lawyers to do good legal work. Um, but I think your point underscores the importance, quite frankly, of knowledge management.
Yes.
This is what we've been, the bell we've been ringing for years and years and years. The firm has created content for years and years and years, millions of documents, millions of pieces of content that is, codified into documents, saved into some platform, DMS or other. And what has happened with, and I'll just call them modern technologies, because it's not all AI. We're calling all of this new stuff AI, and it's almost meaningless to use that term already. I think what most people mean by it is modern technologies, right? Like search tools are not AI, right? Generative AI is a different type of AI than expert systems. So I think we need to be more precise in a lot of this stuff, but I'll get off that high horse for a second. The benefit of all of this, the awareness, the hype, whether it's the market hype or not, but the hype, the fact that, AI is in every newscast out there, every discussion about business now includes a discussion about AI. I think that helps those of us who are trying to promote knowledge management, because it goes to the point that it's important that we leverage the firm's collective knowledge and wisdom and experience. And you cannot do that unless you're able to unearth it and access it and share it and get it around to the others at the firm. There's so much oil, right? Data, the new oil. There's so much great information at all of these firms. It's just the accessibility of it has been a huge problem for many, many years. And to your point about your platform, Ted, the fact that you can tap into other systems and bring them into an interface that is useful and easy to access and is intuitive, this is really where it's at. Because again, that content has always been there. And sometimes you have PSLs or practice support lawyers or knowledge management attorneys or whatever we're calling our folks nowadays, sort of manually do some of that work to raise it to the top, et cetera. But, tools like yours and others are really effective in surfacing that gold that has in many organizations been untapped for many, many years. So those organizations that focus on that and appreciate that and understand that they're sitting on a gold mine or a oil field or whatever analogy we want to use, and all they have to do is take the steps to expose it and make it accessible, they're going to win. Whether that's AI or whether that's just automation or whether that's just good business practices or processes and getting the right people in the right spots. This is what I love about what's going on now. Whether or not we're in a bubble, I have some thoughts about that too. But I'm thankful that this is shining a light on the, as I like to say, old problems, new tools. Right? It's the same problems, right? It's accessibility and everything else. We just have more powerful tools now that enable us to get that work done. So I'm excited about it, even if it might be a financial bubble or overinvestment bubble or these types of things. There are going to be some of these companies that don't survive, but many will, and I think many will do well.
So Patrick, I think. Oh, sorry, Ted.
No, go ahead, Kevin.
I was just going to say a lot of what Patrick was alluding to strikes me as information architecture. And arguably, perhaps law firms were a little late to the game in terms of focusing on information architecture. I think AI clearly lit that fire, but there were a number of firms building toward this moment for a decade or more. But I think that's really the challenge on the data side, is having systems that can speak to one another and findability, usability, right? That's all IA before AI, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's and we are positioned in an interesting spot on that kind of data landscape. InfoDash, the name comes from we're DoorDash for your data, and
I like it.
we kind of deliver it when you want, where you want. We've chosen intranets and extranets as kind of the single pane of glass to view these disparate data sources in a coherent and consolidated way. But the reality is that that data orchestration layer has a lot of value in the AI scenario too. So let me ask you guys a question. Do you guys know the average length of a bull market?
I'm not sure.
I'd be guessing.
Well, there's
10 years?
5, and that's the
5.
optimistic. That is the optimistic. There's lots of different ways to measure. So yeah, 5 is the average. Do you know the longest bull market to ever run? How long it was and when?
5 years and a month. No.
You're
in
in it
now?
You're in. You're in
Yeah.
You're
it.
in it? Oh,
Yeah,
no.
and
That'd be mine.
yeah. So 10 to and there's also debate about this as well. So 2010 to 2022 during COVID, hard to say that the 30 or 40% market drop in COVID is still in scope for the bull market definition, but we so quickly recovered from that. That wasn't a normal cycle. So I consider that we are still in the 2010 bull market, 15 years. Because essentially
It's pretty remarkable.
it is, and what it tells you is that we're overdue. We're overdue for a correction. These things are natural cycles, like kind of like the Gartner hype cycle. And from an investment perspective, there's so much. I keep a spreadsheet of VCs that reach out to us. In fact, I shared it with you. That it's longer than the last time I sent it to you a week ago. Like, I get hit up. So we started recording the spreadsheet maybe 6 weeks before ILTA. So it's been 3 months tops, maybe less, and I've got 26 VCs in there. When you have that number, so these, I'm looking at signals in the market. Like, all right, what signals can we look at to tell us we're in a bubble? All right, we've got capital out there chasing opportunities uber aggressively. We've got Meta spending $250 million as signing bonuses to hire resources. We've got 100x or sometimes valuations for companies that don't even have revenue, or a bit, even sometimes a public business plan as to what they're going to do. And then it almost feels like we're heading, there's some parallels to the NFT market back in the day. Remember the Bored Apes? And what crazy numbers, like hundreds of thousands of dollars for these NFTs. Now the difference is that was a bunch of nonsense, and we're solving real world business problems. There's real applications of the blockchain, but NFTs, I don't know your feelings on them. There was so much. There was more hype than really fundamental value there. I think that's different with this, and it's going to be interesting to see the perspectives of the investor community and your founder community that are you have to make decisions as a founder of a startup, like, hey, do I accept this lofty valuation that I can get a big amount of money for a little bit of dilution? That's very attractive. The downside of that is if you don't deliver on expectations because maybe we have some turbulence or the market is oversaturated and you can't deliver on expectations, you're going to have a down round, which is very, very bad. There's all sorts of provisions that are tied to that money that you accepted that have really bad consequences for you as a founder when that happens. So you guys bringing this audience together right now, I think is super interesting, because I can't wait to just read the room and have some side conversations and, from founders and from investors, like, hey, how are you guys thinking about this? Like, you're coming in at 12, 14x revenue on a startup that's in a crowded space and lots of uncertainty. But I would imagine, Patrick, that's the goal, is to have these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And to your point, it's going to be such a nice mix of folks in the room, right? The investors who are, trying to get a piece of these legal tech companies, the legal tech companies that are, trying to figure it all out, right? And that's why I love that we have a lot of these experienced folks who have been through it and could give those legal tech companies some advice. And then the buyers in the room as well. And, uh, I'm kind of glad I'm not at a law firm anymore because, uh, you know, trying to schedule, I hear this among my, friends who are former, peers and in positions that I used to occupy, just trying to keep up with the vendors and see the demos and not miss anything. And then of course it's compounded by the fact that the partners at the firm are seeing this stuff in regular sort of the course of their day. Sometimes clients come to them and say, "Hey, would you take a look at our stuff?" But now you get the additional, this used to be a little bit of a problem, but a lot more, these partners are coming to the KM and innovation folks and saying, "Have we looked at this tool? Have we looked at that tool?" And if it happens once in a while, it's fine. And sometimes you learn about something new. But what I'm hearing is it's happening multiple times a week from multiple partners, and it just adds. And you can't say, well, we're not going to look at that one. You say yes, we'll absolutely add it to the list, and we'll get back to you and give you our assessment. But some firms have full-time AI assessors in terms of like assessing new tools, and that's just a job that never existed when I was doing it. So yeah, it's hard on everybody, but there's a lot of opportunities to your point as well. And I think there's going to be some big winners, and I think there's going to be a lot that just sort of fall off and try something else. But it'll be interesting. But to your point earlier, I think we've been through this as well, even within legal, right? Think about the early e-discovery days, right? In the early 2000s, there were so many companies trying to get a piece of that action because it was so lucrative. And that market has sort of,
settled down,
consolidated and settled down. And there's some leaders and there's some niche players as well. I suspect that'll happen with legal AI. And that's a good thing. I don't think this is sustainable. I don't think anybody wants it to continue like it is now. I think everybody wants it to calm down a little bit and let the best stuff rise to the top and let the mediocrity, fade away. I think that's a good thing.
Do you actually see things calming down? Maybe from a new product entrant perspective, things will calm down. But in terms of implications on a law firm business model, I don't see that calming down anytime soon. I see that getting more complicated. I think we're just at the front end of that personally.
Well, with money
agreed
pushing so aggressively into the space, it's going to continue until that dries up. Once the capital dries up, there will be less fuel. There'll be less dry powder for these startups to leverage to create their wares. I mean, look at the Harvey situation. So Harvey raised, I think they did 2 rounds. I don't remember which rounds they were. One was at a $3 billion valuation, and 3 or 4 months later, it was at a $5 billion valuation. Now, okay, you might say, "Oh, great! If you were early in on Harvey, man, and no shade to Harvey, like they're doing great. Lagora's doing great, but if I'm an investor, I'm looking at that and going, I don't want any piece of that. Like, I don't want to go anywhere near that because it's just the volatility, like having such a meteoric rise creates risk. How much of, and this isn't specific to Harvey, but just in general with startups, like how much of your revenue is vibe revenue, right? People trying out, maybe you doing paid POCs. And what sort of churn are you going to experience once things stabilize? Those are really important questions. And, startup valuations are driven on revenue, multiples of revenue. And it's like your company is being valued based on this revenue that is probably a good significant chunk of it's going to churn when things stabilize. So that whole situation makes me nervous. just as a player in the space. Like, yeah, it's getting risky.
Yeah, for sure. And we've always said even the largest law firms are relatively small businesses, and those who cater to them, you could do very, very well, of course, being focused on legal tech or whatever niche you might be focused on. But when you're talking really large numbers, when you're talking multiple billions, these are the types of numbers that sort of larger, broader, non-niche companies usually go for, right? If you're selling to Walmart, or Walmart's the biggest, so it's maybe not a great example, but if you're selling to, IBM, Oracle, selling to Apple, these companies have hundreds of thousands of employees. The largest law firm has what? I don't know, 14,000 employees, something like that.
Yeah.
And then it drops off pretty quickly from there. So even large law firms are relatively small businesses. So if you're selling into the legal world, into law firms, there's only so many seats you can sell to, right? And of course, some smart companies have done, broadened their targets, right? So outside of legal, you expand to more generally professional services that do similar work. And then there's more TAM, more total addressable market there for you to target, which is smart, of course. But yeah, I think there's some delusion in terms of, how big can we get, especially if you're sort of very niche, right? But it's interesting to see. And what I love about today is, there's, I think more than ever, people are really trying to figure out how to do it better, right? And that's what we're all about, right? What we've always been all about. How can we do this better, stronger, faster? And I think there's a lot of interesting, smart people trying to accomplish those goals. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to be moderating your keynote panel at the Legal Tech Connect conference. We're sponsors, and we have a demo room. I can't remember which day it is, but we have a demo room one day at KM&I. We're going to be showing our new extranet platform, which is a high Q replacement. We're really bullish about our opportunity in that space. Nothing has really changed in the legal extranet space in honestly more than 10 years. And we are really doing it differently by, again, enabling this firms to surface data and to client and make it client facing in some really interesting ways, and then a whole bunch of client facing AI stuff. But for those that come, we'll be showing that solution off. Kevin, how do people find out more? Because we're wrapping up here. Before we do, I want you guys to tell people how to find out more about LTC and the KM&I Summit.
Yeah, well, we've got obviously a landing page for each. What is it? KM&IforLegal.com, which will provide links to Legal Tech Connect, which legaltechconnect.com. There's information about both events on both websites. So check it out. We've just recently expanded what we've got, coming into shape with respect to the agenda and the speakers and the solutions showcase stage that continues to grow. We've just added a third segment. So there will be a lot of buzz, a lot of energy in a beautiful space in October in New York, which tends to be a great time to spend some time in New York City. So it should be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We're excited about it. So appreciate you letting us talk about it and share some details, Ted.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll give my stamp of approval. I go to a lot of conferences. I think this year we're doing 14, and I do 12 of them. So I'm not doing. I didn't do. There was a TLTF and PwC event in London, and I let somebody else make that transatlantic trip. And then Legal Geek, I'm missing as well. Matt Yezovich, who you guys know, and Adam Young are heading over there. That transatlantic travel is rough, doing so I'll let the younger guys with more hair.
I was going to say, you're old. You're getting too old for that stuff.
No doubt. No doubt. Well, I can vouch. I do a lot of events, and I can vouch for KM&I. It is fantastic. You guys, top-notch food. It's a really nice space. It is a very class act. And I've seen the agenda for LTC, and the content looks incredible. So I'm really excited about that. So thank you guys for spending a few minutes with me today. And I'm going to see you in person in about 8 weeks.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Thank you, Ted.
Thank you, Ted. Thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
All right. Take care.
All right.
See you soon.
Thanks.
You too.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Legal Innovation Spotlight. If you found value in this chat, hit the subscribe button to be notified when we release new episodes. We'd also really appreciate it if you could take a moment to rate us and leave us a review wherever you're listening right now. Your feedback helps us provide you with top-notch content.